Hello, everyone. Today is November 22nd, 2022. My guest today is Balaji Viswanathan. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Balaji.
It's my pleasure. So it's great to get connected with your community of listeners here.
Yes. And excuse me, I didn't mention Balaji is the CEO of Invento Robotics and is the most followed person on Quora, the social media platform for asking and responding to questions. So,
Thank you.
Balaji, Inventor Robotics is not the first company you founded, correct?
Correct. So yeah, go ahead.
Continue. No, continue.
Yeah, I founded a couple of startups before this thing, and I was also part of a good startup exit also before this.
And what did you learn from those previous startups?
The lot of interesting learnings. Again, I have a good experience in failing and in a lot of different this thing. So the first one of the most important thing is it takes a long time for a good story to come out. So oftentimes we look at the media. This thing we look at the tail end of like what success is. And so we get we delude ourselves that in 1 year we would be getting onto this thing. Given with all the things that is happening in crypto, this is the getting onto this 1 or 2 year time cycles that we have when we start the company. That is too little, which I didn't know when I started first. So at the end of first year, so I was building a MOOC, a massively open online course, but back then we didn't have a term for that. I'm talking about before Coursera, Udacity, Udemy. We were the first in that business in 2009. Back then, we had the idea like we will be collecting courses from the universities and then bring a proper social layer into it, and then enable people to take university level courses, get certificates. So that was the idea. And then after a year, it still did not take up as much this thing. So we folded and then pivoted into something else. And that whole market sort of like blossomed just a year later. So when we folded in 2010 timeframe, still the online course part did not take off fully well. Like by 2012. That market really took off. So oftentimes the timing the market is very hard. So you need to be prepared for the long haul, and majority of the companies, over 90-95% the companies, they all take a long enough time, 3 to 5 year time horizon at least, to give enough chance for both the industry as well as your customers and investors to get to know you. And so like after I folded the company, a lot of people reached out to me, even investors reached out again, are you still interested in the company? And by the way, we have moved to a different idea. So by the time people got to know how we were building that unique thing, we were already out of that game. So that was the most important learning I got. It takes a long enough time, which like you don't get from media and other things. So we think that it's an instant, either you get it there in 1 year or not. It is never that way. And on a related note is, how do you keep yourself sustaining? And this is a very important goal. There's a lot of intermediate steps that you need to take in, which again, when I started my first company, I didn't pay attention to it. So it is like, okay, I need to create my online application, which 1 million people have to use it. So there were a couple of hundred people using that thing. If done properly, it is actually good achievement. But I didn't see that as an achievement. And the key difference is, how do you enable these early people who are engaging with you to actually care about your product and start paying money? This is the second key lesson, a very important lesson. if somebody is not paying money in the early days, then it's probably like again in many of the tools, it's probably you might not be solving the right problem, which is so very few companies they can like start free and then keep free premium. Lot of times most of the companies they start on the premium side and then add the free to scale it up. You don't start with the free, then you attract all sorts of wrong audience. So you add like among those 300 400 initial users, if you add like 50 or 60 people paid users, and these paid users really care about the problem, where they keep giving feedback and so on, and I work with them for the first 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, I would have had a far better product. Because these paid users they care about the real problem, because they are paying something worthy. So that's a very very important lesson. This thing, how do you keep sustained in the long this thing? It's not, you cannot keep building something and then expect one day you'll have we have millions of people getting onto it. It's not going to happen. You have this like 30 40 50, like depending on your industry and product. In some industry maybe like 5 or 10 customers. If it is enterprises, that should be more than sufficient. In some of them you might need like 40 or 50 if they are like a B2C. So some kind of thing that depends on your industry. But then having that initial users who are very closely working with you on refining the product, also paying some aspect. The paying will give you give you some runway, some dry powder to work with. As well as the important thing is you solve the right problems and don't get distracted with solving the wrong problems. So these to say staying long enough and then having the intermediate goals as having like few people really care about the problem passionately, care about enough to pay money for it, even if they are not large numbers, 30 40 50 people. That would getting those things should be the very important goal in over the first 1 to 2 years of your startup. So these are my learnings from my previous attempts.
Okay. And you mentioned that not working the wrong problems, working the right problems. And so my question is, because right now you're the CEO of a successful robotics company, but this initial startup you speak of in 2011 is a MOOC, an online course. So how did you determine what problems are worth solving? And how did you apply that, such a stark change in technology type?
Okay, so this is a sort of like there is no scientific answer to sort of like which problem one should pick, because there are n number of problems out there. So there are like again sort of that ikigai Venn diagram kind of. There's a popular Venn diagram of like four circles intersecting. So what you are good at, what you are really passionate at, and what the world needs. So this intersection is the problem area. So I was very passionate about education. In fact, that is one of the reasons why I was active on Quora too. So to sort of like share what I've learned over time, and I've also been a teacher in the past. So that is the important sort of like passion. I had some skills in teaching too. So that is like some of my strengths came into this thing while I was a graduate student at University of Maryland. And then the third part of it, I thought world needs that thing, because like you need millions of people to access top-notch curriculum. So that is where like the three circles sort of intersecting. But then the problem was there is also time element to it. So it's not just space, there's also time element. The time element wise, in 2011, sort of the world was like starting to think about like online curriculum, but they were not moving at that speed. But by 2013 or so, people like more and more people realize that learning online is actually not a bad thing. You can do a bunch of the things. So that change in attitudes, the market takes some time, and you get it. So then I went into my second passion and strength. So each person would have like three or five or more strength areas. So you have to look inside what else are you good at. So other area was we were good at was fintech, which had built tools in the past for. So then we went into fintech, which again we were a bit early in the game. We were taking Twitter sentiments and mining Twitter sentiments to analyze like where the market movements might be.
What are Twitter sentiments? Oh,
Yeah, sentiment. So
okay.
so for instance, if somebody is posting about Apple, then you should be able to understand that they are posting about Apple. Are they posting positive or negative about it? Are they talking about Apple stock or Apple the product or Apple leadership? And then finally, you have to know how much credible that person is. So together, you come up with a score for that tweet. This person comes from a credible person, and he talks negative, and he talks about this particular topic, and then you aggregate across the whole stream. Now you can see where the market is trending. Are the Apple followers going more negative or positive? Which again we were doing in 2012, like 2011, 12 timeframe. But we were like a little bit early in the game. Like many people did not take Twitter seriously, at least Twitter for like market kind of. Most people were like, hey, people will share on Twitter like their breakfast images or some random thing, not like something like important political or financial stuff. So that was the prevailing market attitude in 2011-12 timeframe. So which again, in the following couple of years, that whole attitude changed. But then we again once again folded up that part. So, but that is again part of my interest. Then my third interest, this thing was in robotics, because that is where my PhD was. And so I've taught in the university, so sort of that was my teaching part. I've sort of worked in some fintech too, so that's my like why the fintech. And then the reason like picked up robotics is again partly where I was reasonably good at because of my degree in that, and partly because I believe robotics market is going, but still it's a long haul. It is, people have talked about robots for decades. It is slowly coming to a sort of like I believe as a tipping point where it becomes very common. In the last 2 years, it has happened with sort of vacuum cleaners. Like 3-4 years ago, you didn't see that many vacuum cleaners, but in this last two Christmas, that is one of the most sold one, the vacuum cleaners, robotic vacuum cleaners. So sort of people are slowly getting used to the idea, not as fast as what I wanted, but somewhat people are getting to the idea. So, but this time I said that I'm going to stay long enough, and then I'm also making revenues as a company. We are doing revenues, and we had early customers who are giving feedback and so on. So that enabled us to survive this long and keep scaling in the market.
And so this iteration, you had customers early that were invested in your products?
Absolutely, from the earliest days. In fact, even when we had a very rudimentary product like that just we hacked over a weekend and getting a we had customers who had real problems, and they were also paying money for that, and we were working with them and constantly solving them. So that was the thing. So if we had started creating a robot and started giving away for free and help this thing, so we would have got feedback, but the feedback would have been all over the place. When somebody who's paying money and then they care about the problem more than this thing, and their feedback will be a lot more valuable. So it's not just the money itself, but the fact that they care about a problem, that is more important. So this time we did that. That was a big change.
Okay. And it's in your studies, you had a PhD in robotics.
So that's sort of like so I should be getting my PhD soon. So I'm still a technically PhD candidate. I need to submit my final dissertation. So I'm a PhD ABD. So technically not at a doctor. But yeah. So but this is where I spent a good chunk of my academic career on.
Wow. So did you leave school to continue to become an entrepreneur?
I left school to like join my first job. I started my career at Microsoft in Redmond. So I thought I'll take a 1 year break from school and then explore the industry. It was sort of like it's a long detour, because back then it was still enticing if you're a graduate student to get a like a attractive offer from companies like Microsoft and Google. People get very tempted. So I was one of the guys who got tempted, went into the industry, and spent years in that thing, and then sort of like re-enrolled to like finish my PhD now. But that is the thing. So not for starting the company, but to work for Microsoft, I left school.
How was your experience at Microsoft?
It was an amazing thing. So Microsoft at that point was going through a sort of a transition. It was in the late days of Ballmer. So it was like Bill Gates had left, and then Steve Ballmer had taken. It was a sort of like in some Charles Dickens opening of it's the best of the times and the worst of the times. In that sense, it is a like the Microsoft was still the big gorilla, like this thing, and then I was in the Windows team, and Windows had probably the largest engineering team of almost any company in the world, and building the product which people cannot do without. Like if you had to buy a computer, it had to be a Windows. So it was sort of like a power. The second was a very fascinating one. And to meet so many smart people, like Microsoft was like had so many engineers, amazing engineers. I've seen them, but at the same time they were failing in most of the things they were working on. So it was a sort of a paradox. You had like amazing engineers, you had a incredible like a history, like people like Bill Gates had worked on, and the market wise people had to buy the Windows and Office, and so there was no choice back then. And then but still with all that thing, like in all the new ventures, like in search engines or mobile phones and so on, it was still failing. So briefly I was part of the research team. I was helping out with the phone team for like about 10 months. I was working in the phone team, and then before that I was in the search team for some time, or like the team that created some of the R&D tools for the search. It's still with all that money and engineering power, still the company was failing to startups. So that was a very, very interesting experience, that even with all the money and engineering talent, it is not sufficient to create a very successful product. That was my key learning at Microsoft.
What do you think the reason is?
So there is one part of it is there is the ability to take risk, and Microsoft at that point was very, very risk averse, I would say. So for instance, a teammate of mine in the research and development, so they created a thing called marketplace for applications, and where you can have applications and reviews and ratings, and people can download applications from a single place, what would later be called as the App Store. So I'm talking about like in 2007-8 time frame, where we didn't have a thing. So that idea that guy created, like nobody took it, and then 6 months later, Apple, Steve Jobs launched this thing. We are going to have this thing called App Store. Microsoft did not take that risk in creating that App Store for itself. Same thing happened. I was briefly interacting with a team that was doing like a large tablet kind of thing with a multi-touch environment. You can touch it, you can pinch, zoom, all those things. Way before iPad came. So that tablet team could have become like the iPad. The phone App Store could have been the killer application that could have taken over. And Microsoft was not taking sufficient risk. So it is about you can have all the engineers, but if your leadership is like not taking the risk, and leadership is not aware of what's going on in the market, it will still fail. And this is one thing that Microsoft sort of fixed later with Satya's entry. Was able to turn around the company, and now they are doing amazing. But that thing was missing, was the leadership.
Okay. And so how did you apply your lessons from Microsoft to Invento Robotics?
So some aspects on it. So we had to take the risk in some of the games. So people will say this is like people like trash many of our ideas. It is fine. Many ideas, because I've seen so many ideas, especially working in a research team, come up. So many ideas that come out, and people will say like, this is like the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Why would somebody go to a place to download application? I'll go to the a software producer site and then download it. Why would I go to this central location? So like I've seen so many ideas that got thrown away. At least 5 6 other ideas, including like a Dropbox, this is a storage on the cloud. We are going to store the documents on the cloud, and then you can retrieve it anytime. People are like, why would somebody do that? There's no security and all those things. People would do that, and then it is so expensive to store on the cloud. I'm talking about this is a 2008-9 time frame, before Box and Dropbox completely changed the industry. So many ideas, like it would look ridiculous when the inventor talks about it, because for most of the common people it is not like obvious, because the guy who's inventing that, he's taking a non-obvious thing. If it were so obvious, somebody else would have done it. It is because it is so ridiculous and stupid. That's why it's a very, very interesting innovation. I've seen that thing, and I keep telling my engineers too. It is most of the time what we look at from an outsider angle, it might look like ridiculous, or the wrong direction. But we need to have the conviction to stay put, because the inventor knows something that the outsiders do not. That conviction, if we stay long enough, that might there's a high likelihood. Again, there is no sure shot way, but it's a high likelihood that could come out well.
Okay. And through your time at Invento Robotics, how did you balance being an engineer, being technical, but also being a founder and being a CEO? And did you ever, how was that taking on both sides?
So the early stage of a startup, especially in a very, very core technical product like robotics, there is no luxury for the CEO or the founders. Okay, I'm going to sit in my chair, and then I'm going to you have to do that. So I had to, in the initial days, I learned welding and doing basic electronics, soldering, all those things, going back to sort of like high school and early college days to learn a bunch of this thing, hand working. And it is something, because you have to try out a lot of experiments, and the lot of experiments, the founders will have a better context, better way to communicate with the team. So you as a founder, especially in a core technical product, have to be hands-on. There is no other option. Like whether the founder is on the business side or on the technical side, they have to get on. If the founders try to stay aloof from the process, then it's not likely to work. It might work in areas where the technology is just a layer, where your thing is, let's say, two-sided markets. Let's say bringing Uber. The technology of Uber was not the most sexiest at the start. It is about bringing all the drivers and the recruiting all the riders, the drunk people in the Bay Area, all those. So to get this initial people, you have to focus. So the early days of Uber, the founders primarily focused on that, not necessarily technology. That is fine for Uber-like thing. For companies like which is where the core is much more on the technology, the founders have to be hands-on. Have to see themselves as engineers. Just that with the years of engineering experience we have had, we just have to also look at whether are we solving the right problems, and so on. So sometimes you have to step back and then look at the whole forest. But for like 50-60% of the time at least, you have to be hands-on.
Okay. And so you have invented a robot that, what have you learned in the last 6 years and about robotics, and how has robotics changed in the last 6 years?
Amazing. There's a lot of things that we have seen over the so sort of like there are a bunch of revolutions happening on the neighboring areas. In fact, some of these things we built our in-house tools, and then we saw improvements happening on the neighboring thing, and we were able to bring in. So, for instance, the changes on computer vision over the last 6 years, amazing progress in being able to bring in. Right now the state of vision, being able to recognize from video what's happening, all those things, incredible changes happened on that field of vision. Parallelly, on natural language processing, not as much on the vision side, but then there is like at least 30% improvement on the natural language processing. So how the machines understand, it's still not as well as what we expected like 10 years ago, how machines will be. Because when the early days of Siri and Alexa came in, there was a lot more promise. Oh, Alexa would do all these things, or Siri would do all these things. A decade later, still it is not as like exciting as it promised to be. But still, there's a lot of progress. But vision, it was able to meet the expectation and beat the expectation. The voice-wise, it is sort of like met some expectation, but mostly failed to achieve like sort of like a regular usage. And then in terms of lidars, lidar is one of the lidar. It is one of the core sensors that the robot uses to localize itself, to know where it is in the environment. So that has improved substantially over the last 6-7 years, especially miniaturized ones. And in fact, Apple and all have started shipping that with their product itself now. So that has improved substantially to enable autonomous navigation to go in. So I've seen 3-4 key fields that improved substantially around robotics. But still, there's a lot of challenges remaining. So one of the biggest things in terms of the mindset, which I wish I knew like 6 years ago, was that there is a strong necessary for a human element in the robotics loop. So there is we call that now the human in the loop knowledge, human working robot. So in our case, like a human, so we right now we are primarily focused on caregiving robots. And so these robots take care of seniors. We are taking care of hundreds of seniors at this point. And these robots work with the remote nurses. So the nurses handle a sort of a fleet of robots. So this robot and the human combination, we call it the human in the loop, that is a very, very important one. That like I've learned over the years. Many people sort of like dismiss that idea, including myself, dismiss that idea like 5-6 years ago, like human managing that, like remote control, those things. So people like we especially as engineering founders, we often get into the mindset that should not be how it is. But then it is a very different concept, the human in the loop. So bringing that thing, especially for technical founders to understand it and grasp it. Now the industry is like realizing the importance. We realized it about 1.5 years ago. The rest of the industry is slowly starting to realize human in the loop is a very, very important thing for any complex system. You cannot, just as your computers need the human to work together, that combo is important. Once you start looking at that combo, that human and robot working together, just as the robot is being a force multiplier for the human. Now the society will not be that much like very anxious, like, is the robot going to take over everything? Is it going to be like the Matrix or Terminator and nothing like that? So it's robots like a computer. It's going to be a force multiplier for you. It's going to enable you to work better, faster. So that way, now you can deliver better expectation for the customer and better like putting the society at ease too. So this is something that's a key learning I've learned, and slowly the rest of the industry is also now starting to learn keeping the human in the.
My guest today has been Balaji Viswanathan. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Balaji.
It is such a pleasure to meet you, and let's take it. Thank you.
Thank you.